Welcome to Whitman Partners Perioperative Power List series for 2022. Today we have Terri Freguletti, Vice President of Perioperative Services for Hackensack Meridian Health. Terri, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I know you're busy, and we really appreciate you sharing your time with us to allow your peers to kind of know what a VP does, essentially.
My pleasure, and nice meeting you all.
Nice to meet you too. So my first question is, what event or opportunity launched your career that kind of set you on the trajectory to being a VP?
So, I had graduated nursing school and tried several different areas in nursing, and it really wasn't a match for me. I didn't find an area I liked. So I actually left nursing and was waitressing in a diner. And they called me back to Hackensack. I had applied for an OR internship. And at the time, they were talking about forming a class, but hadn't formed one yet. So about 3 months into my waitressing career, I got a call that they were forming this class, and would I be interested? They wanted to offer me a spot. So I decided, I did go to school for this. I should give nursing one more shot. And I absolutely found my passion in the OR. I loved the teamwork in the OR. And probably like all OR leaders, I had a very good mentor that saw talent in me and really proceeded with positions in my career that enabled me to climb up the ladder. So really just having a strong mentor that saw talent and helped develop me into a leader that I am today.
I think that's incredible that you kind of dipped your toe into nursing, or a type of nursing. You were like, I don't know about this. And then the OR kind of lit your fire, basically.
Right. Yeah, it really did. And I think that everyone in nursing should probably waitress for a while, because you really learn patient satisfaction, and you learn how your actions and your words really related to you actually earning a living as a waitress. But it's a whole thing that, you really know how to connect with people, I think, better when, it becomes a piece of your toolkit.
Awesome. So being overseeing multiple hospitals within a system, how do you approach streamlining like initiatives across multiple sites that have different needs?
So we've set up some surgical services committees, and there's actually 6 committees at the network. And we have directors and leaders, both surgeons and anesthesiologists from across our network that work together on these 6 different subcommittees. And I sit on all of them, so I kind of oversee them all. And I think through working as a team on many projects together, we've been able to move forward, because at this point, I would say now we're all friends. We all know each other, and we've worked together. So I think a lot of it is developing that teamwork and that people skill of relating to the other people. We also did a project where we formed a consulting team, and we went from each of the 16 hospitals in the network, and we kind of provided feedback and spent a week at each location. So we kind of got to know all the people that worked there in their house. So when they talk about their OR, we know what it is. We've been there, we've lived it, we ate in their cafeteria, we've met their players. So I think that allowed us to form a strong basis of knowing the person that you're working with. And then through these 6 subcommittees, we actually have been able to move projects through. So that's how I think we've been successful.
Great. And then when you think about those relationships that you've nurtured, how do you address the staff shortages? How do you address burnout, obviously, because of the pandemic? I mean, that was happening even before the pandemic, and it's made it worse. So how do you address those issues within your system? Like I'm assuming you've had those issues.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So like, what do you guys do?
So this has actually been, I've been an OR nurse now for close to 40 years. And this has been the most difficult period of time in my career. My aunt was a nurse for many years, and she's retired now. And she says that this is the most difficult. She can't even imagine having worked through a pandemic, because you always prepare for the ultimate disaster and the pandemics that might come. And it's kind of like you do some training and you do scenarios, but you don't expect it to be here. And now here, this horrible pandemic that has really tested all of us across the country. And prior to the pandemic, there was a graying of the OR staff, in that, the average age of a nurse was around 56, and the OR staff was like 6 years ahead of it. So we were kind of planning for people to retire by starting perioperative academies and training our own new nurses right out of nursing school to go to the OR. And that was keeping us whole as people retired. But then the pandemic hit. And not only did people retire probably about 5 years faster than they would have had the pandemic not hit, but also traveling became the new way for the younger generation to make a lot of money a lot faster. And they were also in positions where they weren't yet settled in their lives. So it was interesting to travel and to go places, and it combined making a lot of money with the opportunity to travel at a time in their lives where they weren't tied down with kids and families, etc. So all of that kind of hit together. And I know the whole country is going through this right now. There's ORs that are closed down, across the country just because they don't have OR staff. And I think the pandemic made it a little bit worse, because as ORs scaled down a bit because of the pandemic and elective cases were canceled and postponed, the OR nurses were pulled to do things that isn't in their wheelhouse. So it kind of fried a little bit of that loyalty. I love my job. I love what I do. When now they're working in COVID units, and they're turning and positioning patients, and they're seeing a lot more death than they're used to seeing in an OR. So it did fry all of, the toolkit for an OR nurse, and it was very trying. So our nurses, we actually spoke to them about travelers, and the ones that were left really weren't keen on the idea of having travelers come in, that they would have to show where everything is and train everybody on how to do the cases that were making double or triple their salary. So the way we kind of sold it to them is that they were going to be here, and they would work weekends and nights and evening, and do all the less desirable shifts. And we would also have them here so that our own team members could have vacation time. So it was kind of sold as they augmented what they did so that they can continue to have more normal lives in the world of pandemic. So that's kind of how we helped. They had a voice in it, and so they accepted, like, those terms actually worked for them as well. So it was a win-win for them.
Yeah, that's the first time I've ever heard anything like that, because it's kind of like very easily for a staff nurse to feel threatened or to feel resentful, and then they decide to travel because they just want to make the money, or they just don't feel valued at their full-time position. But to kind of market it, so to speak, as they're here to help you do your job better and make it less stressful, I think that's kind of genius, actually.
Yeah. And then, for them to work overtime, obviously we have critical bonus shift salary dollars for them to work extra and stay overtime. But they had a say in kind of how many there would be, and they would help me get my vacation time, and we would still be able to have our summer vacation. And, we didn't have to work as many weekends because we put more of them on the weekends. So, and then we paid a little bonus shift for our own team members that would be there to supervise and to make sure they knew where things were. So,
yeah, that's perfect. Has the pandemic changed your leadership style at all compared to previously?
I think that from my leadership style, I probably work too many days and too many hours now that I wasn't used to doing prior to the pandemic. We didn't have to work as hard. and the Zoom meetings do go late into the evening and on weekends. So I think it's required a lot more energy and effort. And I think that I like to be a leader of people, because I feel that it's really a people-oriented profession. So I like to do one-on-ones and be there and around and hear what people are thinking, and try to come up with solutions that work for both parties involved. So in order to still be able to do that, it does require a lot more extra hours, but I do still feel that making that people connection is part of my success as a leader.
Mm-hmm. And how do you handle like just team morale? So even with all of the things you mentioned with supporting them in their job and making sure they don't get burnt out and overworked, like some days are probably just going to be hard no matter what, especially, the worst day of like the worst surge that we've had. So how do you just handle those days where everybody's just like feeling like they're done?
So, always food works pretty well in an OR. So, we'll have Friday lunches or, pizza days. We'll celebrate a specific team that had a success with a cake with their names on it. So we just try to keep it light and real and, connect back to the people. And, food usually does work in an OR. So praise and food, some cakes, that kind of stuff.
How have you guys prioritized like resources across the systems, especially during the beginning of the pandemic? PPE was a big resource that was scarce, and then with the supply chain issues within the last year or so, that's impacted ORs. How do you manage that across multiple systems? Some hospitals may be doing very well, others may have a need, not just for like actual items, but just like people, like bodies to go and help. So how have you guys done that?
So we have not taken people from one hospital and moved them to another hospital. Although we do have, if they would like to go, there's a bonus shift situation if they volunteer to go. And so supplies and equipment were probably a biggest challenge in the beginning, because all the elective cases kind of dried up. So it wasn't a people issue right away. It was more supplies and equipment. And what our network did is we partnered with vendors to warehouse equipment and supplies and to order extra than we normally would have and get some alternate vendors in. And then we also have some GPOs that like have warehouses specifically designated for Hackensack Meridian supplies and equipment. And then our central purchasing people would drive the supplies at night up and down to where the greatest need was. So Hackensack is the largest of the hospitals in Hackensack Meridian. And then Jersey Shore University Medical Center is our second largest. So those supplies would come to us just in time from smaller hospitals as, kind of as the demand met through either the warehouses or our group purchasing partners, or the smaller hospitals. They would go and, say, okay, you have an extra on the shelf. We're going to take that for tomorrow and move it to this place. So at night, they kind of transversed the Garden State Parkway in New Jersey, moving our own supplies on our own vehicles to where they were needed most.
Cool. Has there been any time throughout your career where you felt you've had to change your management style? Or how did people respond to you as a manager being a woman? And obviously, women dominate the nursing industry, but leadership kind of can be different. So have you found that you've had to change how you respond to people? Did they respond to you differently versus like a man in your same position? How did you navigate that?
So yes, I would say that there still is some sexism in medical industry. Most of the frontline workers are women, yet as you go up the chain, the highest senior executives are mostly still men. and physicians are mostly still male dominated. So it is, and you do have to read the room when you're in a room and get your point across, sometimes in a softer manner, because that direct, in your face approach isn't going to work depending on who's in the room. I think as you become historically known for being a person that is honest and their answers have been spot on, or you have data to support what you're saying and your ideas have worked in the past, I think your latitude becomes a little better. But whenever you're in a group, you do have to, I think, as a woman, read the room a little bit, and you can't maybe deliver that same style you would deliver to a room full of nurses that work for you, that know you for years. So I do think it is a little balance that you have to do as a woman to fit into that, that male-dominated leadership room.
Yeah, yeah. So last question, what is one thing that you love about your job?
So what I love about my job is that it's teamwork to the max. It's like on steroids. You're never by yourself when you work in an OR. You're always in a team situation. So no matter how bad the one patient may be that needs your care, you're surrounded by a team. And I think that that's really what fed me like to loving the OR is you weren't this new nurse left on your own. And, if the patient was going bad, you didn't really have resources with you. In an OR, you always have a team. And, it's really, that's what turns me on about the OR is that teamwork and the ability to have, all hands on deck. You think that somebody will tell you we're short-staffed, and then a patient comes up, that's a trauma. And it feels like people come out of the woodwork and you're like, I thought we were short-staffed. There's 4 anesthesiologists in the room and 6 surgeons and 15 nurses, and the recovery room is coming in to help with the code. And it's just such teamwork that really it's an amazing place to work. And if you've never experienced teamwork, I think the OR is really a great example of where it occurs.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I also just want to thank you and your team for, I just think about how much nurses have gone through this last two years. And so I just want to thank you guys for hanging in there and doing what you do.
Oh, it's our pleasure. We actually, when things go right, it's very rewarding. It's a rewarding day.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.